Hello, everyone, and welcome to another powerful issue episode of Wisdom to Wealth. With me today is an amazing coach, consultant, Tim Wessel. He's the president and founder of ThriveCoaching.net. They help people go from surviving to thriving in their individual life, their family, and their business. Quick background on Tim. He spent 12 years as a CPA working with everyone from small businesses up to Fortune 500 companies with very strategic consulting. Out of that industry, he went into becoming a family pastor, built one of the largest Celebrate Recoveries. That's a 12-step program in the country and in the world, and has done a lot of work with families and individual with everything from suicidalness, addiction, to a lot of family challenges to work challenges, and really helping people improve their lives. Tim has actually himself was conceived in rape, so he's done a lot of work going from being the way he was born and going through abuse as a child and as a young adult. And he's had an amazing healing story. If you haven't already seen it, I encourage you go on their website, thrivecoaching.net, and there's a link to a 20-something documentary about his life on the website. So I'd encourage you, if you do nothing else except listen to this interview and watch that video, you will get a ton of value from our talk today. And whether you're a person that just came recovering from a major setback in your life, or you're a successful person doing great in all areas, but you'd like to go to the next level and you just want to thrive at the next level possible, you will get value from this talk. So, with that said, Tim, welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you.
Thanks, David. Good to see you.
Thank you, brother. We all know each other from different paths. Some people may have seen your movie. There is a follow up I know on the website as well, like 10, 15 years later. For people who have never heard of you before, give us a quick background on some of the challenges you've overcome and, just for people who don't know you yet.
Yeah, you've said most of it. The movie's also on Amazon Prime. It's called Tim. So people that have that, it's an easy way to access it. But yeah, really just conceived and raped to a homeless mother in a homeless shelter. She was encouraged to keep me and build a life with me and thought, that would be our family. Unfortunately, as a woman without any family to support her and a child to take care of and trying to take on the world, it was overwhelming. So we had a very toxic start. Um, at 2.5 years old, I was given to a neighbor. Unfortunately, that neighbor, began to sexually abuse me as a young child. That abuse continued for years, continued through other people. As I got to the age of about 12, puberty kicks in. We had moved away from some of the people that had been abusing me, and I kicked into my masculine, testosterone driven self that says nobody's going to touch me or hurt me ever again.
Right.
So I became very violent. I began to use drugs and alcohol. I was trying to find my way. I was very sick. I was diagnosed schizophrenic, bipolar, in and out of mental hospitals, in and out of rehabs, just a toxic, crazy journey that progressed to the point of falling in love and trying to fight and build a life because I felt love and I felt a connection. I felt there was a reason to try.
Right.
And came home to her cheating on me, which led to an absolute meltdown night that ended with a gun and a suicide attempt. And on my way to take care of business with my suicide attempt, walking out the door, a pastor approached my door on a Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. He was having a coffee at Wendy's about a block from my house and felt God nudge him to go knock on doors and invite people to their church and their youth group. And so I encountered this man on a very, very dark morning for me, covered in blood. House was destroyed. I had abused everybody within my reach all night long. And then some goofy man telling me there's a loving God, on my doorstep. So we had kind of an ugly exchange
Mm-hmm.
because I was angry at somebody suggesting there was a God. My mother had been raped. I had been raped. Like, where's God? What, dude, you're crazy.
Right.
But I say all the time, I got my mustard seed of faith that what if there's a God here now on this day of all days? Why? That's just the question was like, why would God stop me from taking my life? People had hurt me, but now I'm hurting people. I was the bad guy now. But invited him in. I gave my life to Christ. We prayed. It seemed too good to be true, too easy, too simple.
Right.
And then he got up to leave, and I'm like, oh, I still got a lot of problems. I'm probably going to jail, and I had other things going on. So he found me Teen Challenge. It's a year-long program, Christ-centered, biblically based. Pretty much all we do is read the Word, worship God, minister for a year straight together, and get discipled on a very deep level. And I turned my life around from there. Got out, no high school education, no driver's license, no friends, no family. They wouldn't let me back in their life. So basically, a homeless person living in a church parking lot in a car that I couldn't drive because I didn't have a license.
Right.
But God miraculously just opened doors and redeemed and restored my life. And, I found myself. Now I have 10 years of college education. I was a 3.97 student in college after being kicked out of high school and night school and every other kind of school I tried to do as a young person. And now, went on, nice job, corporate level, traveling the country. I was the sober CPA guy. So I did, I would be under budget and get home early on every job because I wanted to be home with my family.
Tim, you went from being the most crazy guy in your crew to the most stable guy in your crew, your work crew.
Yeah, basically, right. And but that was, it was nice. I made good money. It kind of affirmed me as a human being that like I can do anything I want to do. But my heart really was to help people. And it wasn't, I had to do billable hours. You weren't even supposed to talk to your coworkers because you had to come up with certain billable hours. I was out of 400 employees, I was in the top 4 of billable hours every year, but it wasn't what I was called to do and meant to do. So I had an opportunity to go into ministry, stepped into ministry, did that for 12 years. I think 12 years is my magic number because I did 12 years as a CPA, 12 years as a pastor.
I noticed that
But
looking at
now
your bio today. I'm like, hey, there's 12-year pattern here.
Might be. But today, I work with individuals, families, businesses, nonprofits, just discipling people, helping people, just coaching and consulting people.
Mm-hmm.
That's different. I tell people come to see me, I can wear my pastor hat and we can have deep spiritual conversations. I can wear my CPA hat and we can build your business and make strategic planning and do whatever we got to do there. I can wear my counseling hat and we can dig into your dark, deep past, whatever that might be. By the way, there's a lot of brokenness in dysfunctional families like mine, but I'm finding there's an equal number of broken folks that come from Christian homes.
Right.
And there's this different kinds of dysfunction that come out of that and different beliefs we come from. And so there's a lot to unwind for most of us in our childhood and our past that we carry into adult life. And then, of course, I got the coach hat that's like, I'm going to kick your butt and push you, and we're going to set goals, and I'm going to hold you accountable to them, and we're going to get somewhere. So, and there's obviously, you do any kind of work like that. Several of my clients, it's a friend hat,
Mm-hmm.
They come in, they just want to sit somebody that loves them, that cares about them, and knows that I'm going to be there for them 100% in whatever capacity they need me. So I'm living the dream today. I'm blessed to do what I do.
Yeah, that's one thing I appreciate about you, Tim, is that uh, you went through so much trauma and abuse as a kid, and you really intentionally built a lot of life skills. One thing I remember we talked about that I think is very instructive for others to hear is when you and your wife. But by the way, you guys have 3 young, amazing adult children. You and Gina, 32 years married. I remember you told me that early in the marriage, you and Gina did not want to have kids until you dealt with certain things and were equipped with certain skill sets and mindsets and knew how to be good parents. Like, could you share with us what were some of the things that you guys did to learn how to be a good husband, how to be a good wife, how to be a good parent, and really intentionally build your life? Because most people just do what they saw their parents do, and you guys applied great intentionality, probably out of necessity because of where you were at and in your development and healing of your own abuse. I'd love to hear more of that. I think that could really help the listeners and the watchers.
Yeah, so I was, 100% dysfunction and abuse, and I knew I had nothing to build off of. My wife had divorced parents, but had a very solid father and grandmother that followed Jesus, that raised her well. She was loved, she was comforted, cared for.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of opposites. I fell in love with her family maybe before I fully fell in love with her, if you know what I mean. Just walking into the church, seeing healthy families, understanding there was something different than I had known.
You're like
But
feeling love in their presence, like being around them.
oh yeah, yeah. We're gonna sit and pray together at every meal, and we're gonna sit down and get into the Word at the kitchen table on a Tuesday afternoon, just because it was life giving. But yeah, I think we had a lot of humility and an understanding that this is a tall order. I was a youth pastor before I had kids,
Mm-hmm.
and I watched good families. We had a thriving youth group. We had a couple hundred kids in our youth group, and so I had a lot of relationship with a lot of kids. And what was going on in that kid's life and in his heart and in his mind about God, about his family, was shocking to me that it wasn't better than I thought.
Right.
I knew the parents, I knew the families. So I'm like, oh, yeah, look at all these beautiful Christian families. And there was just a lot of confusion, a lot of unhealthy relationships. It was terrifying to me because I thought all I had to do is take them to church and, they're going to turn out and be good little Christian kids. So I think we had a deep level of respect, a reasonable level of fear, knowing that this is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So we hit the ground running. We read every book known to man about parenting, about discipline, about all of the above. And we just sought advice and counsel outside of ourselves. We looked at families in the church that were doing it well, and we go, what's different about them than them? We had this hallway. I'll never forget. It was toddlers through, fifth graders in all the classrooms. And there were parents that proudly talked about their spankings, in the church world. That's spare the rod, spoil the child. Well, there were some people so adamant about spanking. They talked about it all the time, but yet their kids in those classrooms were a train wreck. And some of those kids in their teen years were a train wreck. So I'm like, okay, I don't think spanking is the fix. Somehow the
Yeah, you need
Christian
the
world
you need the you
sometimes
need the
leans on
structure.
that.
You need the structure and the love. If the love is missing, the kids go bad.
Yeah, and if you read the experts, there's a time for spankings at certain ages, and there's a time where it's absolutely detrimental
Mm-hmm.
to use any kind of physical violence. So we just went after it as if we know nothing, and we're going to seek counsel, we're going to seek advice, and we're going to build from there. What I was blessed to do is I left the CPA world and parented differently as a pastor, as we were able to start every morning in a devotional with our kids. And we had 5 of us. So in a 5-day work week, school week, we had a different leader every day. When they were little, it'd be open the Bible and put on a page your finger, and we'd talk about the Word of God. As they got older, they were a little more creative, and they led us in different ways. And all of us participated in that. Every car ride to a soccer game, a sporting event, to school on the way home from school, we had an intentional plan for every single minute we spent with them. When we put them to bed at night, we had an intentional formula and plan of how we put them to bed, how we prayed, how we interacted with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, I think, what was magical for us, is we didn't waste any of those moments. I'd be in line to pick my kids up at school. Every parent's on the phone. Their kids get in the back. They're still on the phone. Like, shh, quiet, I'm on the phone with work or my friend. And we put our phones away. We had a basket at home our phones went into, so we were present. Like, we just made a lot of very intentional choices to build relationship with our
Mm-hmm.
kids, to teach them scripture, to walk that out with them, not just because I said so, go in the room and do your homework. Like, we built a community with our kids that was deep and intimate and personal. We did a
Mm-hmm.
family mission statement as a young family on a vacation, and we walked out of there with the mission statement on our wall that we live by. Not overtly Christian, but very
Very
important
values
things for
based.
our family. Yep.
So Tim, so some people hearing what you just said, number one, I applaud your level of intentionality. I think it's very instructive. I notice that some people, when they hear a great plan, sometimes they're inspired to model the plan, and some people think, "I can't do that. These guys are super parents." What would you say to a parent right now who is that parent that's on the phone and not intentionally engaging with their kids, or maybe they even have young adult kids and they're realizing, "Man, I really missed the mark."
Yeah.
What would you encourage them as just, hey, figuring out the top one, two, three things they can do to intentionally upgrade who they're being and their level of intentionality? And because like
Yeah. I mean,
I was that kid in school, in high school. I was the
mhm.
kid who had all the spankings. I had all the discipline. I was really good at playing the role of a good Christian
Yeah.
kid, but I had all
Right.
this unresolved anger and stuff, and it was showing up in
Yeah.
addictive behavior already as a 15, 16-year-old. So to that parent, what would you encourage them, whether their kids are adults or they're still in the household, of finding the top two or three things they can do to improve?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is to ask for help and to get outside ourselves. I mean, my first place I go is to my Heavenly Father, and I look at that relationship and I model my parenting based on how I'm parented through my God the Father.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we do discovery calls all day, every day for anybody who wants it. So we talk to families all over the world that will call and say, okay, we're here. This is where we're at right now. and we will give as much feedback and input and ideas on next steps for them as we possibly can. And we don't charge for that. That is just what we do out of the abundance of our hearts. But it's never too late. It's never too late. Like 20 somethings, my office is full of 20 something kids and their families
Mm-hmm.
because there's all this confusion and they don't communicate well. I do marriage coaching too, which is very similar. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a big deal when your kids are rebelling. My senior pastor just met with me, and he said, I look back. He was at Woodside Bible Church, big Baptist based church, and he said there were all these really strict parents, and everyone's like, look what great parents they are. Their kids walk in a straight line and they never talk, and they're perfect little angels. And then there's these other parents that seem like they're not parenting at all. They're like buddies to their kids. And you applauded this family and you look down at this family. He says, now that I look back on it, those more casual relational families, their kids are still in their life and they're being discipled and they're growing and they're walking with the Lord and they have a family unit. He said some of those other kids left and never came back. And so, it's, to me, everything is about relationships,
Mm-hmm.
relationship with our Heavenly Father, of course, but real relationships with one another. Because I said so is not good parenting language.
Right.
It's a different thing to sit down and have long, extensive conversations with our kids saying, I think you're wise. I think you're capable of understanding. Let me share wisdom I've learned as a parent. Now, at some age, they stop asking for wisdom. So
Right.
we have to parent differently when they're young adults.
Yeah, I was fortunate when my sons were about 12 and 16, and you really helped us with that process. And I talked about it in the Beyond Billions book about how
Mhm.
I went to originally my first pastor of 18 years at the time, and they would not do this rite of passage ceremony for my sons. They're like, we're not Jewish. I'm like, you don't gotta be Jewish to do it. Other cultures do it too. But it's this whole process of going to different quote unquote leaders and just acknowledging that they were not equipped to do the thing I wanted to do. And then I was like, well, let me go talk to Tim, and you're able to help us. But some people on that journey of wanting to improve, they look for help for the people they've been around. And sometimes the people you've been around have been good to take you to where you are, but they're not the
Mhm.
person to take you to where you're being called to go next. So I think
Right.
I'm glad you brought up that humility that's needed just to ask for help and get some equipping. And that was a process for me because I was disappointed. I was like, how come you're not helping me? You've been my pastor for 18 years. Like, I'm making a very specific request with specific desired outcomes of you, and you're not willing to do it.
Right.
So I'm glad you brought that up about different families. And, thank God in that journey, I've really advised my sons as an older man to a younger man. And I stopped telling them, because I'm the boss, you have to do it. And so they actively spend time with me, and they're 20 and 24 now, you guys are really blessed to have a great relationship with your young adult children too. Um, One thing that I noticed is it was sort of like a crisis situation. Uh, a couple of them in my business journey that led to me realizing, oh, I really need to be a lot more intentional about my strategy here.
Mm-hmm.
You and your family, you guys went through a crisis earlier this year, and crises usually come out of the blue.
Right.
Like, you're not like, oh yeah, this is probably going to happen at this point. It wasn't like our business is growing to this level. We got to hire another person. Like, crises just come out of the blue. You can share as much or as little as you want about what you guys have gone through this year, but you had like a major health challenge.
Mm-hmm.
What would you share whatever you want to about that? I'd love to hear what have been your takeaways about how do we maybe just deal with the fallout of crises and dealing with them when they happen.
Yeah. There's a documentary on Netflix called The American Gospel that kind of deals with the idea we sometimes have as Christians that we get this spoon fed life, that we always get the front parking spot at the mall and it'll never rain on us and no bad things happen. And it's a lie and it's hurtful. It's harmful to
Mm-hmm.
living and kingdom building to tell those kind of falsehoods that God's this perfect little genie in a bottle to make sure I never suffer. I suffer differently. I suffer well, but we're going to have suffering. We're going to go through pain. We're going to go through experiences. So yeah,
Right.
we were just doing our life, doing what we do, loving people, serving our church, loving our family, everything clipping along good. For me, it was kind of confusing because I just, had some neck aches, had some ringing in my ears that kind of muffled sound at church, and I'm not a big doctor guy, so I'm like, whatever. And it kind of went away. So I thought, okay, we're good. But kind of woke up in a hospital with my head shaved and 40 staples in my head. A bunch of people looking at me and not really understanding how I got there and what had happened. but had a spinal fluid leak that led to a brain bleed, that led to pressure in my brain, that led to confusion. And family took my keys away and, protected me from myself because I didn't understand what was going on. And, but also led to a miraculous healing journey that, even the doctors didn't expect, where I just woke up. They were talking 75%. I would be about 75% of my former self, might get to 90%. And I just woke up 100%. And, they're just, it wasn't supposed to happen like that.
You said your one
But
doctor friend said a lot of people die from the condition you had.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, they were concerned that, bleeding in the brain, can kill you for sure. And I was just fortunate. It was caught early enough. The way it all happened, I had the perfect everything in the journey. But
Mm-hmm.
it's also, it is what it is. So what blessed me the most, well, a lot of things blessed me about it. I had some of the best God time I've ever had in my life because I was stuck in a bed for weeks, But my kids, like there was a point where my oldest son brought my other kids out in the hallway and said, "Hey, they're saying Dad might not come back. Dad might not be able to work. You know, Mom and Dad have this house, and there's a lot going on here." And he just said, "You guys, God's good. It's okay. Like this is good. God's doing something good, even if we can't see it." And that faith they had just to believe and trust
Mm-hmm.
that it wasn't like, "Oh my gosh, the sky is falling." It was like, "Hey, this is a thing. This is life. And God's still in it, and God's still doing something amazing. We just don't know exactly what it is yet."
Right.
And he just said, "We'll just pray and we'll just take care of it. Whatever happens, we'll take care of it." Like that to me was the biggest blessing, is to see my son and my kids walk in that kind of faith in a very scary moment. It wasn't a pretty sight to see me with tubes coming out of my head and big things of blood around my neck, where it was leaking out into these things. It was scary. And it scared most people that saw it, but my kids just sat there in faith. And I also, my own faith, kind of questioned, people ask me questions after the fact, to realize I never prayed about money. I never once felt insecure about money. And I'm not loaded. I don't have money coming out my ears to live off the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
But I trust my Father that's the least of my problems. I will figure out money.
Mm-hmm.
And my health. I realized I never prayed for money. I never prayed for my health. I just trusted that God had that covered. I prayed for my heart. I
Mm-hmm.
prayed for the kind of man I am. I prayed for my leadership as a Christian man before my family as I started to heal. I prayed for those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
So, just taking a step back from it after you get out of it, those are things that stood out to me the most, that there was this peace and this belief, this understanding that God was in our midst and God was working and it would all work out. And even had I walked out of there, 75% crippled, blind, deaf, whatever, it still would have been all right.
Mm-hmm.
We would have figured it out.
Yeah, it's interesting how sometimes we can hear about Marie Curie, who was blind and deaf, and yet she had a really miserable childhood and was really mad about it, and she learned to find peace and then had a really productive adult life. Sometimes we can read about something like that and go, "That's amazing," and it's a different thing to go through it ourselves.
Yeah, sure,
Uh,
sure.
and a challenge I had was I had a desire for certain things in certain relationships, and when they weren't going that way, I'm like, well, do I hang on to? I had an expectation, and expectations can lead to disappointments, especially if it's related to another person. We're not in control of them, and that shows
Right.
up in business all the time. People trying to control their employees, control their spouse, control their kids, whoever. And so, like, I
Yeah.
could say I'm a recovered control freak, Tim. But one benefit of having a health challenge is we realize we're only in control of our thoughts, our actions, and our perspective. That's it.
Yeah.
And if we can
Yeah.
humbly ask for wisdom, which we agree the best way to do is ask for divine guidance, ask God to guide
Yeah.
us, He'll give us
Yeah.
whatever we need. And those setbacks can oftentimes be the biggest blessings. What would you say to someone who maybe is right now struggling with something? A spouse left them. They have some addiction. They're not sure how to get over it, but they realize they're self-medicating. That happened with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Post-COVID, all that isolation of the shutdown. Some people have not fully emotionally recovered from that.
Right.
What are you seeing
Right.
when the people you're meeting with and coaching, and what would be your encouragement to them, whether it's a physical challenge like you went through or just an emotional thing? They realize, man, I need to upgrade this pattern here before my life, like before something breaks. before
Yeah.
someone leaves me, before I lose my business, whatever that thing is.
Yeah, I think, the most important thing we learn is the humility to ask for help and realize we're better with other people than we are alone. Now, I also say that with an understanding not everybody is the right person.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't ask my church, my pastors, a few that I've had, to help me with 10 years of sexual abuse and torture and some of the things I lived through. They weren't equipped.
Right.
And quite frankly, they could do more harm than good trying. So you need to find the right people with the right, background to serve us and help us and walk beside us. Now, if you're an addict, alcoholic, there's 12-step programs, there's celebrate recoveries, there's a lot of help.
Mm-hmm.
You got to take the first step and get help. But relational things, we sit there and we fight through and try to figure it out. We go online, people go to groups on Facebook and try to ask questions. We need to get somebody to walk beside us, somebody to hold us accountable, somebody to help us keep our head above water while we're walking through the storm.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned to do that. I've done that throughout my life. I've always got deep friends. I've got coaches in every area of my life that help me and up my levels. And I know when I need to go there, and I know when to do that. So that's the biggest thing. But right now, I'm seeing, you related to COVID, but the post-COVID era,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of families coming in with young adults, um, maybe a teenager, older teen, or young 20 somethings,
Mm-hmm.
who are just broken. They are lost. They can't function. They can't get their life together. They're not communicating with their parents. There's a disconnect. A lot of, in Michigan here where we are,
Mm-hmm.
we legalized marijuana. There is so much marijuana use in our young people, and the vaping in the schools, that it's like it's more prevalent than ever. And it's not the stuff we had when we were kids. It is very high THC. It's causing psychosis. I have multiple families, Christian families, good families, where their son is beating up their father at the front door so he can go out and get high because dad's such an idiot, he doesn't get it. That weed's good for me and I should be able to do this. So that is I'm seeing a lot of that, and the kids claiming, I have depression, I have anxiety, you don't understand, you want me to go get a job and I have mental health issues. There is also kind of culturally this over exaggeration of mental health. I am very
Mm-hmm.
much in mental health. I do that for a living. I have a nonprofit that works with it every day.
Right.
But sometimes our kids get a hold of that and it becomes a reason not to try, a reason not to get up. Now, I was diagnosed schizophrenic. I was diagnosed bipolar. I was mentally ill by
Right.
every definition of the word. But somewhere along the way, God got a hold of my heart and I didn't stay in that pattern. So when you're a parent who's lived, you're my age or, our age, and you're like, no, anxiety is normal. Everybody has some anxiety. You don't get to quit life because you feel anxiety, but your kid's like, you're cruel, you're evil, you're bad, you don't see me, you don't understand. Families can't work through that divide, and it's really upsetting and hard. It's hard to watch. So I get a hold of the kids and I try to communicate where the parents are coming from, and then I help the parents communicate a little differently so they can get to the table and hear each other.
Mm-hmm.
But that is happening at a mass level. Like literally, I'm thinking new ways to skin the cat and deal with that issue because I probably need to have groups for parents that have you know 10 tables of 20 parents each in it, and groups for the kids who are trying to also turn their life around and start to set goals and build a life for themselves. Like that is half of my business right now, are
Mm-hmm.
those kind of dynamics in families.
Yeah, it is interesting how it's very easy to go along with who you're around. So if young people anywhere in America in the last 8 years have gone through, public education, there has definitely been a more normalization of victim mentality. And it's
Mm-hmm.
sort of wild. I'm writing my memoir right now, and I'm 50. And I'm like, I realize there are even small ways in telling my story where I'm like, man, there's a little bit of maybe victim thinking here. Like it's not enough focused on our ability to heal, like God's ability to heal us from anything.
Right.
And so it's sort of interesting how like just the language we're hearing, we can be fully compassionate and be fully accountable to upgrade and
Right.
not give in to victim thinking. Even in business, that happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like too much coddling of employees, and then before you know it, you're out of business. It's
Right.
how would you recommend to a leader that's dealing with this, whether it's a parent or a business owner, how do they um, one piece is very clear from what you said, get outside help because we're like family, right? They said the last person that you need to hear a wisdom from is the person closest to you. You'll discount what they say, so get a third party authority. So that's where like someone working with you as a coach or consultant is helpful. What would you say about maybe how to someone, whether it's a business owner or as an employee with the challenge that they want to help with? So like, hey, maybe they did really good for a long time and now like they're not performing like they used to, or someone that has a teen or a young adult child that all of a sudden is just their life's falling apart. How would you recommend to them to like have that initial conversation or get them to the table to even be willing to improve? Because it's either that or if it's their employee, you got to let them go.
Right.
So what are you
Right.
finding as some best practices even get them willing to talk to the third party, like a coach or a consultant like
Yeah,
yourself?
kind of, probably different worlds. With a kid, that's a different relationship. You approach it a lot differently than you do an employee.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty hard driving. I have high expectations when somebody works for me and how their performance is. So, I clarify the expectations up front. I don't assume people believe in the same work ethic and ideas as I do. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think you need to have a culture in a business and an expectation that's built from day one when you interview them on what they're going to show up like. It gives you more empowerment to have those conversations along the way if you told them. Too often, I think, especially as Christians, we just assume what I think and feel about Jesus and life and work ethic, everybody else feels and thinks. Not so. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's a wide variety of that. So I'm big on clarifying my expectations early and often in every relationship,
Mm-hmm.
boundaries early and often in every relationship. That empowers me to communicate in love along the way differently. But what happens often is everything goes, we grow apart like this, and now we got this huge problem to deal with, and we're a mile apart. And now there's mistrust and all that built in. So I don't exactly know how to answer that uh, for both sides at the same time. But with the kids, the family, which I think is extremely important, um, part of our problem is the political scene we've been in, right? People are demonizing being Christian. You think this, you think that, you think that. There's some truth in some of those arguments, right? Where there's times where we're just so black and white that I talked to a pastor today about the first socialist we ever knew, Jesus. There was parts of Jesus and parts of Christianity that were socialism. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, it's politicized, it's different, but to be able to meet with some compassion and understanding of people who think that's the ideal structure
Mm-hmm.
instead of just saying everything's bad and I have a strict line, like, we desire a relationship more than we desire being right. So that's always sticky because everything's so polarized. We don't even get to the table to communicate anymore. And some parents have this black and white, you work. I worked 60 hours when I was 15, you little punk, get to work. You're playing video games at midnight.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nowhere to go, like where do you start? So we've got to see the other people. We need to bring the walls down as a parent or a boss. I mean, we've got a huge responsibility to lead properly,
Mm-hmm.
and there's got to be some humility in there. There needs to be some compassion and understanding. But I am not a coddler. I don't believe in coddling. I left traditional counseling as my mode of healing because I felt coddled. I felt like they just made excuses. They put labels on me and they kind of told me, well, you'll never be able to be fully healed. Like all that happened to you. Like you shouldn't have too high expectation. I'm like, thanks. So, but my relationship with God, who called me to abundant life, and so there's nothing I can't heal and redeem that
Mm-hmm.
the enemy has done. That's a different journey. So, we have to be careful.
Yeah, I think that's a great framework there. What I'm hearing you saying is every situation and relationship and what that divide is different, but putting relationship over being right. I had a friend recently that said that they're like, oh, I just realized like I'm a socialist or communist like Jesus, and I'm like, yeah, let's not put Jesus in any political box, whether
Right.
conservative or liberal. It's like
Right.
let's realize that God is a lot more than maybe we've thought of him as, and maybe the box we put him in. And I think that's even the same
Right.
thing. Sometimes we think, oh yeah, uh, for me, I was like, yeah, a wife should do this and a husband should do this. And then as I grew and matured, I'm like, hey, I think I could be a lot better a husband. Like I'm seeing things in my relationship here that
You can do dishes once in a while.
Exactly, or even just like not being so non-flexible.
Yeah.
It's like we should be firm about principles and flexible about routines.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
every marriage, the husband and wife have different personalities and different strengths, and they may divide labor differently, every couple, but you can still have
Yeah.
universal principles of love, respect, and humility of spirit. Give the other person the benefit of the doubt. Consider them better than you. Like all those are
Yeah.
principles that Jesus taught, and they're all through.
Amen.
And so I think that that's great. Put relationship over being right, and don't try to put other people, whether it's an employee or a spouse or a kid, in a box. Oh, you're this, so you have to act this way.
Hmm.
Um, Tim, one thing I experienced, uh, I actually had two people that I was working with, very much just like leave working with our company. And these are very accomplished people. This happened in the last week. They're very accomplished. Now, in the past, like one of them literally has made whole sections of policy for governments, for national
Hmm.
governments.
Hmm. Hmm.
So like we were blessed to have them working with us, and they
Right.
told me, hey, they thought we had a philosophical disagreement about something. I asked for specifics about what that meant. They told me the specifics. I said, look at our paperwork, look at our structure. We literally have those things, but they
Hmm.
didn't see it that way, so we parted ways as friends. Now in the past, I probably would have been disappointed and felt
Right.
like, oh man, I really missed the mark as a boss. I lost this A player superstar. But
Hmm.
the thing that I've learned to do in the last 5 years is realize every time someone leaves your life, you can see it as an opportunity for God to replace them with someone even better.
Right.
And then the other thing was this I was really depressed a year ago about a personal relationship that shifted where someone just really sort of left my life. And and so I was really, really bummed for like a month about it. And I was
Hmm.
asking God, how do I have healing? Like, what should I learn from this? And I heard like a 30-second clip from this pastor saying, some people are meant to be in your life a rocket booster. They're meant to help take you from where you are to the next level. And if they don't
Hmm.
fall off of your life, they'll drag you down. They have to
Hmm.
fall off. Their job, the purpose of God's purpose in their life was to boost you up and then drop away so that you keep going. And
Right.
so that really helped me. What would you encourage someone about knowing, like a marriage, you should fight for it, right? That's
Hmm.
a covenant. It's not just a contract. But like say you have friendship or a close relationship, or even a person you have a real good friendship with in your company that maybe they leave the company. How would you recommend someone deal with that in determining how much should I fight for this and how much should I maybe accept? Maybe they were a rocket booster and they're meant
Yeah.
to leave my life.
It's a great question. I meet with several pastors who struggle with often being lonely because people don't see them as like you and I, just normal down to earth. I'm a pastor, but I'm not pastoring a church right now.
Yeah, people put them
Uh,
on a pedestal and don't approach them.
yeah, they don't get called for friend hangouts. Who wants to hang out with a pastor? He's perfect. He's all godly and into,
Mm-hmm.
and they just get very, very lonely and isolated. And we were talking about friendships and, relationships and people coming and going. And
Mm-hmm.
it's hard. Now, we all have a background. I have abandonment issues, so I hate losing people and friends, but I do, just like everybody else. I've had good business, strategic relationships with Christ followers that I thought, this is a dream. Look, we love Jesus and we're doing this. And then found out that people were drastically different than I thought they were and their beliefs. So um, we talked today about it. Jesus had three close to him, right?
Out
His
of the
three,
12 disciples, the three close ones.
yeah. And then there were 12, and then there were 72, and then there were the crowds. So, we talked about being deliberate and intentional about who's our three. And so that's important. We all need deep, intimate relationships. We need people we can trust at the deepest level. Business isn't always the place you're going to find those.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in life, in friendships, we need those. But I'm very strategic about who I allow as my inner circle and my friends. And part of the way I do that is I am extremely clear on expectations. Like, again, I've had so many broken relationships over the years. I hate it. I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
So as a good steward of relationships, I over communicate early and often my expectations, my boundaries, any kind of something that looks a little off. I'm going to go straight at it. Now, I'm wired for that. I run into conflict. I'm not afraid of conflict. Some people are different, so that's more of a challenge for them.
Mm-hmm.
But I realize people appreciate clear expectations, clear communication, clear boundaries. People don't get mad when you tell them, "Hey, here's a boundary of mine. I don't like this." You know. I think you and I had a conversation once about we're both coaches and we're always up leveling people's lives. And yeah, you were coaching me. I said, "Hey, Dave, let's be friends. Let's not coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's be clear when we need coaching. We'll ask. Outside of that, let's not offer unsolicited advice." And
Mm-hmm.
we clarified our relationship like that is super important. I think is that you really communicate your expectations, you really communicate the nature of a relationship, why it exists and what you expect.
Mm-hmm.
um, the more I do that, I can't, like you said at the beginning of the show, we can't control other people. So what I can control is what you know and understand about me
Mm-hmm.
as a coach, as a counselor, as a pastor. People assume things about you. People feel a little bit of like, oh, he's going to psychoanalyze me and judge me or whatever. So all the people that we interact with, we have a lot of people in our family that aren't believers, and they're like, oh, he doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he thinks he's better than us. So I go out of my way to clarify, I don't think that. I don't do that. So I try to evaluate other people's thinking. I ask a lot of questions. I just invest in relationships heavily
Mm-hmm.
and the foundations and the beliefs and the understandings and the expectations. I think we take for granted way too often what that looks like and the nature of it. We need to be clear. We need to really set the terms of what our relationships are, what our work relationships are up front.
Yeah, thank you for those distinctions, Tim. Yeah, that was something that I took away from that experience last week. Was a friend of mine, one of our advisors, sent me. I realized I was praying, and I'm like, "What can I learn from this experience?" And I'm like, one thing that resonated was I could have done more thorough uh, values alignment, like a spiritual and emotional values alignment due diligence. And sometimes you'll meet someone and you click, and it's like, oh wow, like we need these things. They check off those boxes. They want to create the same thing we do. They did. These people did check off all those boxes. But
Yeah.
then, in terms of the values of how we do stuff and how we operate, we could have gone deeper into that. And
Yep.
so that's one thing I'm learning from that experience is let me be even more thorough in that spiritual and emotional part. So the over communicating, we could have done better at over communicating that
Yeah.
piece of
Yeah.
things. So I'm glad you said that because some people think, oh, this is a business relationship. I'm hiring a person. I'm bringing on an investor. I'm doing a JV with another company, whatever, and they think it's just business. But business is done with people. All businesses,
Yeah.
and we all so we should have that level of due diligence, even in seemingly not a friendship but a business relationship. It's still we're dealing with people. So I
Yeah, I
appreciate
think
you
we're
sharing
naive
that.
in the church, in kingdom initiatives where we're all Christ followers. We assume that that just fixes everything. I've seen a lot of very successful, wealthy Christian people go into business together and seen everything fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And they just made some assumptions like, well, yeah, we all think the same, we all have the same agendas, and it just isn't true. So I think we have more of a responsibility within the kingdom to be good stewards of those relationships. This is my brother. This is somebody that matters to me in an eternal way. That's
Mm-hmm.
that I really, really honor that relationship and that person by being extra, putting in the extra energy and effort to make sure that we're okay and that we hear each other, we know and understand each other, and end well when we do end.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important too, that we don't allow there to be some rift or some anger. Oh my gosh, you did that to me. Like, we have a responsibility to forgive and reconcile and do that in a God honoring way,
Mm-hmm.
because we aren't going to, everybody's not going to be a fit.
Right, right. Yeah, and that's okay. About
Mm-hmm.
one thing I heard this one billionaire guy say, which was really interesting to me, was he said any guy, you're talking about pastors, right? People who are really the top, the best. In a religious world, people are like, oh, pastors are the super Christians. In
Yeah,
business, they're like, oh, the billionaires are the super business people, right?
sure.
There's a really similar pattern that's similar to the pastors, like really successful business people that are the best in their industry. They're crazy
Mm-hmm.
lonely because like
Yeah.
they don't have friends. So
Mm-hmm.
this one billionaire said anybody can be a great dad or a great husband. Very few guys can like be a billionaire. And I'm like, this guy's stuck in either or thinking. He thinks he can
Yeah.
either have the best business possible and fulfill all his business dreams, or he can fulfill his family. And I'm like, no, you can fulfill both.
Amen.
You just need the right strategies. Like Michael
Right.
Jordan had 6 coaches at his peak.
Hmm.
Tiger Woods had 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Uh, I would encourage people, if they're not already having personal coaching relationships as well as business, like get more coaches. So
Right.
what would you tell that guy who's a driven guy or driven woman? There's this whole boss babe thing,
Yeah.
uh, and they're really doing good. They have big vision for their business, but maybe they are thinking either or, and their family's suffering as a result. What would you tell that person? On
Yeah. First of all,
You said it twice. Be humble and ask for help. But like, what
yeah.
would you recommend as a way to have a breakthrough on that?
Well, our whole business thing is faith and family values. So, like, my relationship with God, my relationship with people trumps everything. There's no amount of money that I've done thousands of funerals. My wife came to me once. We're doing a funeral. Says, "Man, we are so lucky we get to do this." And I was kind of like, what? She goes, we're just reminded over and over and over what really matters.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's there talking about their wealth. They just are not. They're
Right.
talking about their family. They're talking about their relationships. They're talking about, what they really did. So I think we got to be really careful in pursuing wealth. And there's nothing wrong with wealth. I have incredibly wealthy clients that are doing all parts of their life well. They can afford to add coaches and add elements to hold them accountable to certain parts. It's not easy to keep the balance,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I think, first of all, just praying through and asking God to reveal really what matters the most. It's easy for men, it's easy for women, anybody who becomes successful to go to say, this makes me feel good, this validates me, this proves this is my thing, this is what makes me good. Not okay at the expense of our kids and our families. And you and I have had numerous discussions about that. There
Mm-hmm.
is I saw, I'll try not to say names, but people might figure out who I'm talking about. But I saw this 2020 special. This family was building the largest home in America. And this little kid was there, and he's like, "Daddy, I want 2 movie theaters." And I'll never forget, like, thinking how bizarre it was that this kid was like throwing a temper tantrum on TV in front of the cameras.
Uh-huh.
And the dad's like, "Okay, we'll put 2 movie theaters in." And it was this huge, huge mansion. It was going to be the biggest home in America.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's documentary movies and stuff about this family now. But they have a daughter who died. And I'm not sure if it was suicide or overdose. Um, but I now look at that in perspective of all that. Like, this home took years to build, and how many hours, how much time, how much energy, how much attention did it take to build the biggest house?
Right.
And you lose a child in the midst. Like, that happens far too often. So I think, just slow down and recognize the truth that there's a tension there, and say what really matters when we get to the end of our life and take our last breath. Are we going to care that we made another $1 billion, or are we going to care that we lost a child to the world, and they're apart from God? I went to a tech conference a few years ago with a client of mine who's a sex addict, so he paid me to go and paid me for the whole weekend to be at his side, and we talked through childhood abuse and things, and he wanted accountability, so I went down there. Conference was amazing. I mean, it was like 5 miles long at the New Orleans Convention Center, and farming technology, computer technology. But there was this workshop, people running to get to it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's all this energy going into this one workshop area. So I said, I'm going to go in. Something big's happening. And I went in there, and the guy leading it was an older gentleman. I don't remember his name. And there was another cohort that was a younger gentleman. But he basically said, I'm a billionaire. He says, I did technology. I think he was part of Facebook or Snapchat or
Mm-hmm.
one of those kind of things. And he said, at the expense of children, I made $1 billion. He goes, and I'll never forget him saying this. I think I could have been happy with 100 million, but I had to have $1 billion. I kept going. And he says, but he also said, I won't let my kids get on technology. I won't let my grandkids get on technology. And he was crying. He says, like, we're destroying people. And in some cases, the money and the amount of money we were making destroyed our own families and our own homes, because it was just, we were printing money. It was easy, and we just pursued it because it was like, look at me.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't know exactly how to answer it, other than to just really fall on your face and pray and think about end of life, where you want to be. I don't think any of us want to be saying, my kid was lost to the world and I missed it, and I had a part to play and I was too busy making another million.
Mm-hmm.
That can happen. You and I have both experienced elements of that in our own lives, but we've
Mm-hmm.
also met many people that were in huge regret because it cost them their families.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to a point to close on, Tim, is that uh, if anyone watching this has been thinking either or they've realized places where they've missed the mark, uh, the good thing is God is redemptive, and you can't control what the other person does, whether they forgive you or not, or there's restoration of the relationship. But you can make amends. You can turn around. In the Christian we call it repent. That means turn around and go in the other direction. Don't just say you're sorry and keep doing the thing.
Yeah.
In terms of that, going another direction, like coaching and to get the wisdom, to get the sharpening is key. Um, yeah, I just want to encourage people. It's never too late to turn that around. That was good that guy had the humility to verbally tell others I missed a mark, and I was like, he probably was thinking, how can I fix this, or what can I do to make amends for this? What would you
Right.
recommend? I know your website's thrivecoaching.net. Where would you recommend people come to follow you, to book a session with you? I think they can. There's a booking page link on the website. Like
Yep.
what social medias? What are your socials? Where should people follow you, connect with you?
Yeah, I'm not too crazy on socials. I have Thrive Facebook, Thrive Instagram. I have a personal Facebook page. That's best. Go to my website. You can find all my socials there. Um,
Yeah, I know you're not posting 20 times a day. You're more like me, like you'll post here and there.
yeah, I do live once in a while, stuff like that. I came back from the brain injury, so I've been resetting my interaction with social media and how much time I spend in that environment. So I'm trying to keep that in balance. It's funny when you take a look and realize, oh my goodness, did I spend a lot of time doing that? And was it productive? Was it helpful? Was it healthy? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of in a holding pattern right now, just doing the minimum just to get some things out and communicate. But
Okay, wonderful.
yeah,
So I would encourage people, look, if you got anything out of this at all, you should have definitely got some value what Tim was sharing. Uh, if nothing else, write down one or two strategies that you're going to implement, and do that, and implement the wisdom Tim was sharing with us today. Also, I would secondly say, like, go on Tim's website. Tim, I'm surprised you're not charging $100 for that initial session, but like, whether it's free or it's $100 or $200, do the schedule a session with. I believe Tim people can schedule with you or Gina on it. So if there's a female and she wants to talk to a woman, she could schedule with Gina. Is that still how it's set up?
yeah, but Gina, Gina does a limited amount of clients, so she's
Okay.
very selective in what clients she works on. She doesn't like the messy stuff. She has a full time job. She's an office manager at a construction company, and coaches 10-ish people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
So they should go on
usually
the
everything goes
site,
through
click the
me.
book a consult, and book one with you because you're doing it full time, and Gina is very selective,
Yep.
it's very part time.
Yeah, yeah, and
Okay.
some people pay us anyway for the first meeting. You know how people are; they're just like, I can't take that for free. But a lot of times I love people. I'm not doing this for money. And it's like a tithe, it's like God has blessed me. I have incredible clients I've worked with for years and years and years. And I never want somebody not to pick up the phone to ask for help that first time because of money. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing just how much we can just break loose and begin something new because somebody gave us the courage to do it or gave us a couple tips to get moving. And I
Mm-hmm.
never want to miss that. That's why it's free. And I love meeting people. I've met some of the coolest people around the world for those free phone calls that have become best friends. So
It's
yeah.
wonderful. And for someone who is a business person, like you did such a great job talking about a lot of the families that you're working with and ways you're helping them improve their families. If I recall, don't you like almost have like specific packages for families to work towards specific outcomes? I think you may have something like that for businesses as well, where maybe
Yeah,
they want
the
to improve
business
just
is
their
a little
operations
more.
or some other relationship things in the business.
Yeah, business is so diverse. There's so much going on. So we usually will sit down with a business owner, decision maker, figure out what their culture is, what's going well, what's going poorly, and try to do a cultural impact type assessment. And then, through trainings, through workshops, through employee meetings, just move the culture to a healthier culture all the way around. I think, the person I first did that with, uh, we approached them. We were trying to help them, Christ follower, but at work you know, they make money.
Mm-hmm.
And so people in the community wouldn't say that's a Christ follower. They said that's an ugly person. And we sat down and we just were like, hey, here's what you need. You got turnover is like crazy. People don't like you. People talk bad about you in the community. Like that's not who you should be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, God's honored you with this tremendous success. And he's like, well, how much is it in an hour? Like, kind of, that was the first question out of his mouth, of course. But his wife says, get the checkbook out and write whatever check they want, you know. But it was a beautiful experience of just digging in, praying with our brothers and sisters that ran the business, and saying, like, let's just be powerfully effective in transforming lives as we make money. You know, the people we work with, let them see Jesus in the way we act and the way we behave and the decisions we make. And I love that kind of work, because that goes on for years, generations and generations beyond the business owner's lifetime, even if you do it right.
And it has ripple effects on not only the business owner and their running of the business being a better experience for everyone, but then it affects their employees and their families. There's a ripple effect. So
Yeah,
I
for sure.
yeah, I think of like medical, like I almost became a surgeon. So I'm like, I am so glad I didn't go down that route, because the reason why most doctors get sued is they don't take enough time to listen to the person and really find out what's going on and properly prescribe the best solution. And it sounds like you have a very intentional way of diagnosing what all's going on, where are they now, where does a person want to go, and then helping with the custom plan to get there.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's awesome. Well, Tim, thank you for sharing. Thank you for being with us. Any last final thing you're feeling led to share in closing? Just I want to ask you a specific question. Is anything out of the blue?
No, I guess not. You know,
You're wearing blue, so I said that blue. Well, I'll just say, guys, I'll just share. My best friend died 2 years ago, and I moved every 6 years. 6 years in 2 cities was the longest I lived anywhere. So I had this whole pattern of 6-year friendships. You had the pattern of 2 12-year careers before you're coaching now. And, like my best friend died 2 years ago. I had known him longer than as an adult in business, longer than anyone other than my wife. And like Tim is a person I've known longest now. Thank God you survived your health challenge earlier this year of anyone besides my wife. So I'll just say that Tim is very relational. You can share anything with him and he won't judge you. And there are a lot of great coaches, but not many coaches have gone through the level of major challenges that he's gone through on the personal side, as well as work where, hey, you were raped as a kid. You never told anybody. You can tell Tim and you're going to get the support you need. And there's no judgment. So I just want to share that part. There are still a lot of high-performing people, Tim, that feel like I can talk to people about everything except this one thing. And if there is this one thing, you can talk about that with Tim. So take the leap of faith, book a call with him. He'll be able to serve you with excellence. Tim, thank you for being with us. I really appreciate you and the blessing you are to me in my life. And I appreciate you sharing with our audience some of these great strategies today.
You're welcome. Thanks, brother. We'll see you soon.
I look forward to it. Success and shalom to you. And everyone, post what your biggest takeaway was from this interview. And reach out to Tim and schedule a consult. Thanks so much.